The courtroom was so quiet you could have heard a paperclip fall onto the polished wooden floor. At the front, where the morning sun slanted through tall windows, a 10-year-old girl in a lilac dress stood with her head bowed, gripping the edge of the witness stand so tightly her knuckles shone white. In that hush, her voice, small but unexpectedly steady, broke through. "My name is Lucy Hammond," she said, swallowing hard as she lifted her gaze toward the judge. "And I have something I need to say about my mother." A collective wave of unease rippled through the gallery. Several local reporters who'd arrived only half awake suddenly snapped to attention. Lawyers glanced from one to another, uncertain. The presiding judge, a solemn-looking man in his late 50s, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. He had not anticipated any fireworks in what had been scheduled as a simple custody hearing. But the quiet conviction in Lucy's voice made him sit up straighter. "All right, Miss Hammond," he said gently. "Please tell us what you need to say." Lucy's eyes flicked momentarily to where her mother, Bethany Hammond, was seated behind a polished defense table. The woman wore a conservative gray blazer, her dark hair meticulously pinned back, giving the impression of calm professionalism. But Lucy recognized the tightness around her mother's mouth. The tension in her mother's eyes was anything but calm. Lucy could almost hear the unspoken warning, "Don't you dare!" That silent threat made Lucy's stomach churn, but she forced her shoulders to square, remembering all the nights she'd lain awake, heart pounding. She took in a breath of the stale courthouse air. My mom, is not who everyone thinks she is." A collective murmur, like a gust of air, rushed through the room. Bethany's previously composed expression hardened, her lips pressing thin. She gave a minuscule shake of her head, but Lucy found the nerve to continue, pressing her small hands more firmly onto the stand to steady herself. This was it. She'd run out of places to hide. 6 months earlier, Lucy's world had looked very different. She thought of her mother as the perfect caretaker, strict, yes, but admired by neighbors, beloved by church acquaintances. Bethany was a champion of small-town charities in rural Massachusetts near the border of New Hampshire. She orchestrated donation drives, baked cookies for the local homeless shelter, and led women's groups that sang her praises. People described her as diligent and generous, a mother with a heart for the community. Lucy believed that for a long time. She believed it even on the days Bethany's rules felt suffocating. But there were cracks Lucy had begun to notice, silences in the house that felt ominous, the way Bethany insisted Lucy keep certain bruises hidden. "You fell off your bike," she'd say, though Lucy didn't recall any fall. Lucy learned to bite her lip, never complaining, never questioning. She attended school events in long-sleeved shirts, and if a teacher dared to ask about her puffy wrist, Lucy would repeat the script. She hated lying, but each time she tried to push back, Bethany's eyes would go cold. And Lucy had no father to protect her, no siblings to confide in, just the unstoppable force of her mother's will. Everything changed the day Lucy stumbled upon an old trunk in the attic. She'd been searching for a photo album for a class project, rummaging quietly so as not to provoke her mother's disapproval about messy rummaging. Beneath dusty blankets, Lucy found a battered leather binder stuffed with documents. She wasn't even sure what they meant, just a swirl of typed lines, names, official stamps. But one paper, an old legal form, bore something that made Lucy's hands shake. Change of legal custody. Infant Lucy, last name unknown. The attic had seemed to spin as Lucy realized her own last name, Hammond, might not actually be hers. She discovered a name scrawled in ink, Lucy Friedman. Friedman? She'd never heard it. No mention of Bethany as the birth mother, just interim custody awarded to Miss Bethany J. Hammond. The date was a decade ago. Heart-hammering, Lucy had quietly shoved the binder back, closed the trunk, and tiptoed downstairs, trying not to look as if she'd just discovered her entire life might be a lie. That night, she asked her mother an innocent question. Where did I come from? Did I ever have another name? And Bethany's response had been terrifying in its abruptness. Bethany's smile vanished, replaced by a sharp glare that froze Lucy's blood. "Don't ask silly questions," Bethany said, voice tight. "I gave you everything. That's all you need to know." Lucy retreated to her bedroom, trembling. The next morning, the bruise above her elbow told her she'd gone too far with her inquiries. But Lucy's mind wouldn't let it go. A restless curiosity, fused with the sting of physical pain, awakened a sense of injustice. She was only 10, but deep inside, Lucy felt the wrongness. Her mother wasn't telling the truth about who Lucy was. If her mother lied about that, what else might she be hiding? As the weeks passed, Lucy grew more watchful. She noticed how Bethany handled finances for a local women's shelter, quietly controlling donations, funneling money. Her mother claimed transparency, but Lucy recognized a pattern: handwritten logs that never quite matched official receipts. She overheard phone calls at night, a terse voice barking instructions to disguise the shortfall. Lucy didn't understand adult finances, but she recognized the hush-hush tone that meant wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Bethany's public persona remained immaculate. Church volunteers praising her, local reporters hailing her as a philanthropic mother, a glowing example of altruism. Eventually, Lucy confided in a teacher, Miss Patel. Just a hint. "My mother isn't always nice at home. I'm worried about some things she does." Miss Patel tried to probe for details, but Lucy got scared. She refused to name specifics. Miss Patel, concerned, asked the principal to investigate. The next day, Bethany arrived at the school in her crisp blouse, smiling sweetly for staff. And by the time she left, Miss Patel had apologized. Lucy felt her stomach turn, realizing just how skillful Bethany was at manipulation. But Miss Patel, noticing Lucy's anxiety, secretly contacted a local child advocate who discreetly began looking into the family's background. That advocate found suspicious paperwork involving the women's shelter's funds, prompting local authorities to investigate. And so, piece by piece, a quiet swirl of suspicion built around Bethany Hammond. Lucy didn't know how far it had gone until police came knocking. One detective politely inquired about possible financial misconduct. Bethany, outraged, denied everything and marched her daughter out of the detective's presence. It escalated into a legal tangle that eventually led to the day Lucy found herself in court. On the official record, it started as a financial hearing, but the conversation turned to Lucy's welfare. Were the finances just the tip of the iceberg? Did the state need to remove Lucy from Bethany's custody? And so Lucy ended up on the witness stand. The judge had not specifically asked Lucy to testify against her mother about finances, but a social worker urged Lucy, "If there's anything you need to say, don't be afraid." Lucy's heart pounded with fear, but that unstoppable sense of truth finally burst forth. In the hush of the courtroom, Lucy's second sentence carried even more shock. "My mother, she's been lying about everything, and she hurts me." A collective gasp rose, some members of the audience pressing hands to their mouths. A single tear slipped down Lucy's cheek. She saw her mother's eyes narrow, that old terrifying glint. But Lucy was done being silent. She sucked in a breath, continuing in a trembling but determined voice. "She's not my real mom. I found papers that say she only got custody of me when I was a baby. I don't know who I really am, and she's been hurting me for years." Bethany shot up, her lawyer quickly yanking her down. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. My daughter is obviously confused," Bethany said, forced to remain seated by her counsel's frantic whispering. Lucy's stomach clenched at that mocking tone. "My daughter is confused." No, Lucy wasn't confused anymore. The judge rapped his gavel. "Order. Miss Hammond, please continue carefully. Are you saying that Miss Bethany Hammond is not your biological mother?" Lucy hesitated, voice catching. "That's what I found. She never told me. She always pretended I was her real daughter. And the way she acts, I'm sorry." The tears threatened to overtake her, but Lucy fought them back. She's not the mother everyone thinks. She hits me if I don't do what she wants. She's controlling. She took money that wasn't hers." The tension in the courtroom soared. The city attorney frowned, flipping through documents. Meanwhile, Bethany's expression darkened. Lucy braced for more denial. Indeed, Bethany's lawyer stood, adjusting her crisp jacket, voice taut. "Your Honor, we object to these baseless accusations from a minor who's clearly under undue influence. We request a recess, too." The judge raised a hand, refusing to let her finish. "We will have no such recess yet. The child has spoken serious allegations. Miss Hammond, you will have a chance to respond, but for the moment I want the testimony on record." He looked to Lucy with a gentler gaze. "Lucy, do you have any proof of these claims?" Lucy swallowed. "I brought the papers. They're in my backpack outside, and I have bruises, I guess, but they're old. My mother never let me show them. She said I had to wear long sleeves. Bethany's counsel rolled her eyes, but the judge tapped the gavel once. Clerk, retrieve the child's belongings. In the meantime, Lucy, can you describe how you found out about your possible adoption? So Lucy recounted the attic trunk, trying to keep her voice calm. She recalled how each page felt like a betrayal of everything she'd believed. The entire courtroom listened, transfixed. This was bigger than a simple hearing about possible embezzlement. This was a child revealing a hidden identity, alleged physical abuse, and questionable adoption. The tension was so thick that even the creak of a bench made heads turn. Partway through Lucy's explanation, an officer approached with her small pink backpack. Lucy rummaged, producing photocopies of the legal forms. She stepped forward, handing them to a bailiff, who passed them along to the judge. The man silently scanned the documents, brow furrowed. The hush was unbearable. At last, the judge exhaled. "Miss Hammond," he said, addressing Bethany, "would you care to explain these forms? They appear to show you were granted custody of Lucy Friedman, Friedman being the name here, shortly after her birth. No mention is made of a legal adoption finalization or official name change. This is quite irregular. Your counsel indicated you are the birth mother." Bethany's cheeks colored. She half rose, lips parted, but her lawyer gestured her to remain calm. The lawyer responded, "Your Honor, Miss Hammond can clarify. The child is obviously legally recognized as Lucy Hammond. There must be a misunderstanding or incomplete documentation. My client has always referred to Lucy as her biological child for privacy reasons. There's no wrongdoing in that." Lucy's hands trembled. The way the lawyer brushed aside everything enraged her, but she had to remain polite. She was just a child after all, and the court could easily shift from sympathy to dismissal. She took a breath. "But she never told me," Lucy insisted softly. "She always said I was hers by birth. She said my father left us. That's why we're alone. But these papers? I don't know if there's a father. I don't even know who Friedman is." The judge nodded. "I see. We'll need further verification. Miss Lucy, do you have more to add about your home situation?" That was the question Lucy had dreaded, but the presence of a calm bailiff and a watchful judge gave her the push to speak. She described, haltingly, her mother's rages, the constant fear, the small humiliations like skipping meals as punishment. She omitted overly graphic details, but the gist was enough for the audience to stiffen with horror. A tear rolled down Lucy's cheek. She's nice in front of everyone else. But at home, everything has to be perfect or else she's so angry. Bethany's face twisted with something close to panic. Lucy recognized that expression. It was the moment her mother realized she was losing control. The lawyer tried to interject again, but the judge quieted her, wanting Lucy to finish. When Lucy concluded, the hush was so profound that the squeak of a bench startled everyone. For a moment, no one dared speak. Then the judge coughed. "Lucy, thank you for your honesty. Please take a seat. We will sort these matters carefully." He turned to Bethany. "Miss Hammond, do you wish to respond?" Bethany's shoulders tensed. Her lawyer whispered something, presumably cautioning her. But Bethany stood anyway, face taut with forced composure. "Your Honor, my daughter she's had emotional issues. She's making up stories to get attention. I admit I was granted guardianship from a young age, but I'm effectively her mother. I've never harmed her. She's confusing discipline with abuse." Lucy's eyes stung with tears. She wanted to shout, "That's not true," but forced herself to remain quiet as the judge gave her mother the floor. Bethany continued, casting an indulgent smile. "I only wanted the best for Lucy. Sometimes children see discipline as cruelty. I do not deny being strict, but I categorically deny hurting her physically." The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Miss Patel, Lucy's old teacher, was somewhere in the crowd, eyes shining with concern. The local child advocate, who had quietly helped bring Lucy's story to the surface, watched with folded arms. Meanwhile, a few journalists scribbled furiously, capturing every word. This was bigger than local gossip now. The hearing was about to escalate further, but the judge declared a brief recess to examine Lucy's documents. People rose, stretching, voices buzzing with speculation. Lucy slumped on a bench near the front, hugging her small shoulders. She felt drained, shaky, yet in the swirl of chaos, a gentle tap on her arm startled her. Miss Patel stood there, face kind. "You did so well, Lucy," she whispered. "I'm proud of you. Don't worry." Lucy mustered a weak smile. "Thanks, Miss Patel. I had to do it." Miss Patel nodded. "That took immense courage. Sometimes the truth is the bravest thing we can offer." Then Miss Patel stepped back as the bailiff announced that recess was over. Once more, everyone filed into place. The judge returned, looking grave. "I've reviewed the documents. At a minimum, Miss Hammond, it appears there was no official adoption. If you are not Lucy's birth mother, the court needs clarity. We also have sufficient reason to investigate potential abuse. Therefore, I'm suspending your custody rights pending further inquiry. Lucy will be placed under the state's protective care or with a designated temporary guardian if possible." Bethany inhaled sharply, fury and shock warring on her face. She tried to speak, but the judge held up a finger. "Your counsel can request a hearing to dispute this, but for now, Lucy's safety is paramount. Also, we will have a forensic financial audit regarding the allegations about the shelter's funds." Bethany's lawyer stood, face tight, but nodded. "Understood, Your Honor. We'll schedule a hearing promptly." Lucy felt an odd mixture of relief and dread. She was out of Bethany's control, at least for now. But what next? Who was Friedman? Was there another family out there for Lucy? Her mind spun, tears burning behind her eyes. As the judge tapped his gavel, the swirl of conversation resumed, and a sympathetic social worker approached Lucy. "Come with me," she said softly. "We'll sort out your living arrangements." Lucy let herself be led away, casting one last glance at her mother, who sat stiffly, shoulders trembling. Part of Lucy still felt a pang of sorrow. Bethany was the only mother she'd ever known, even if that mother was cruel. But Lucy also knew she was doing the right thing. She tried to recall a quote Miss Patel once shared: "Sometimes you have to break your own heart in the name of truth." That night, Lucy was placed in a temporary foster arrangement with a kindly older couple named the Johnsons, who had a cozy home on the outskirts of town. She hardly spoke during the ride there, the social worker giving reassurances. Lucy clutched her small backpack, the pink one that had carried the incriminating documents. She'd only gathered minimal personal items from her house, some clothes, her worn teddy bear. She half worried Bethany might appear out of nowhere, furious, but no. The social worker explained that Bethany had to abide by the judge's order or risk immediate arrest. At the Johnsons, Lucy stared around the tidy living room, the scent of baked bread lingering in the air. Mrs. Johnson, a gentle woman with silver curls, knelt to greet Lucy. "Hello, dear. We'll do our best to make you feel welcome. You can rest now. Tomorrow is a new day." Lucy nodded, too exhausted to do more than murmur thanks. She lay awake that night on a borrowed bed, mind replaying the day's events. The hush of the courtroom, her mother's outraged face, the judge's voice promising protection. She felt numb, but also, strangely, lighter than she had in months. Over the next few days, Lucy attended basic orientation with a child advocate who kindly explained legal processes. "We're going to see if anyone from your biological family might come forward," the advocate said. "Sometimes it's complicated, but we want you to feel safe." Lucy listened, quietly absorbing. So Friedman was her birth name? Friedman might be the link to her actual father or mother. Did she have grandparents out there? Meanwhile, the local news coverage soared. "Respected church volunteer Bethany Hammond, allegedly abused child in her care," read one headline. Another teased, "Mystery surrounds Lucy Friedman's identity. Court suspends custody." The child advocate tried to shield Lucy from the sensational details, but snippets trickled in. People who once adored Bethany now expressed shock. Others doubted Lucy's claims, whispering that maybe she was just an ungrateful child. Lucy felt stung by that, but Miss Patel's supportive words reminded her to keep faith. At the Johnson home, Lucy discovered small joys, playing with the couple's fluffy cat, receiving goodnight hugs from Mrs. Johnson, eating dinner without fear. It felt surreal. She missed her old bedroom's pink wallpaper, but not the suffocating tension. She even enrolled in a new school for the time being, a gentle environment where no one demanded she hide bruises. Miss Patel phoned occasionally to check in. "How are you, Lucy?" Miss Patel asked in a warm tone. Lucy would say, "Better," though her heart still clenched with confusion about her mother, about Friedman. One afternoon, the child advocate arrived with a heavy folder. "We have some updates on your case," she said. Lucy perched on the living room couch, a wave of anxiety making her fidget. There's evidence your mother, Bethany, was siphoning charity funds. Investigators are building a strong case. Meanwhile, we're looking for any Friedman relatives. We found a possible lead. Your birth mother's name might be Sharon Friedman. She passed away years ago, but there's mention of a father, someone named Peter Friedman. We're searching for him. Lucy's heart hammered. Father? She'd never known a father figure. Bethany always claimed he had died or abandoned them, sometimes both in conflicting stories. If the child advocate found him, what then? Lucy swallowed. What if? He doesn't want me. The advocate gave her a soft look. We'll cross that bridge if we get to it. For now, no one is forcing you to go anywhere you're not comfortable. You deserve a say. That reassurance calmed Lucy a bit. If her father was alive, would he have cared? Why did he let Bethany take her? Lucy's thoughts whirled, no easy answers forming. Meanwhile, the upcoming court date loomed, a hearing to address Bethany's alleged child abuse, plus the final determination of Lucy's permanent custody arrangement. Lucy dreaded seeing her mother again, dreaded the swirl of conflict, but deep in her chest, a quiet determination burned. She would not let Bethany's manipulations overshadow the truth. When that day arrived, the Johnsons accompanied Lucy to the courthouse, giving her gentle words of support. Miss Patel stood near the entrance, giving Lucy a quick hug. The child advocate escorted Lucy inside, where more reporters milled about. Lucy lowered her head, hugging her arms. She hated the cameras. The child advocate ushered her into a side room until the hearing was set to start. Just wait here until the judge calls you, she said kindly. Soon, a bailiff summoned Lucy. Her stomach churned as she entered the courtroom, scanning the familiar benches and the imposing desk where the judge presided. Bethany was there, sitting next to a new lawyer. Apparently her original counsel had parted ways. Bethany looked pale but resolute. Lucy spotted Miss Patel quietly sitting at the back, offering a small supportive nod. The judge began by summarizing the developments. Forensic accountants found strong evidence of misappropriated shelter funds. Meanwhile, Lucy's claims of abuse were partially substantiated by medical records, old bruises, testimony from Miss Patel, and the suspicious documents. Bethany faced potential criminal charges. Bethany's new lawyer tried to argue that Bethany's strict discipline was misunderstood, that the finances had innocent irregularities, but the judge seemed unconvinced. Then came the mention of Lucy's paternal lead. The child advocate rose, explaining they were in contact with a man claiming to be Lucy's father. Lucy's breath caught. The advocate calmly said, "We have not verified paternity, but we might do a DNA test." The man, Peter Friedman, expresses interest in meeting Lucy. The words echoed in Lucy's ears. He's alive. She had a father. Possibly. Bethany's eyes flashed with panic. She half stood, addressing the judge in a tense voice. You can't just hand Lucy to some stranger. I'm the one who raised her. She's my daughter in everything but birth. Don't let them yank her away from me. A hush fell. Lucy felt a pang of sympathy. Bethany had raised her, though painfully. The judge maintained a stony expression. Miss Hammond, we have cause to believe the environment you provided was harmful. The child is currently in protective custody. If Mr. Friedman is proven to be the father, the court will decide whether Lucy should meet him or not, under supervision, or whether alternative guardianship is needed. Bethany slumped. Lucy saw tears glint in her mother's eyes. That image unsettled Lucy. She'd never seen her mother cry, not once. But tears or not, Lucy remembered the bruises, the nights of fear. She tried to keep her perspective. The child advocate signaled Lucy to speak. Summoning her courage, Lucy approached the microphone. The judge offered a reassuring nod. Lucy, do you feel comfortable telling us your position regarding Mr. Friedman or Miss Hammond? Lucy inhaled, her heart fluttering. She answered quietly, I want to meet him if he's my real dad. I want to know more about my past, about who I really am. She paused, glancing at Bethany's bowed figure. But I don't want to erase everything. I just don't want to be hurt anymore. The judge's face softened. I understand, Lucy. We'll proceed carefully. For now, Miss Hammond, your custodial rights remain suspended. Lucy will remain under the care of the Johnsons. A hearing in 2 weeks will address next steps, including any paternal claims. Understood? Bethany's lawyer grimaced, but nodded. Meanwhile, Lucy exhaled, a subtle sense of relief washing over her. Another wave of talking and gavel tapping ended the session. Lucy stepped outside, blinking in the midday sunshine. Miss Patel found her, gave her a quick, comforting side hug. "You did well," Miss Patel whispered. Lucy nodded, mind swirling with the bombshell that she might soon meet her father. Over the next week, the child advocate arranged the paternal DNA test. Lucy's thoughts veered between excitement. Could Mr. Friedman be kind, love her? And terror. Would he resent her for being raised by someone else? Meanwhile, the social worker gently asked Lucy if she'd be open to a supervised phone call if the test confirmed paternity. Lucy said yes, heart thumping so loudly she thought others could hear it. At the same time, Bethany's meltdown seemed to escalate. She sent letters to Lucy's new address, apologizing, claiming she was manipulated by financial sharks, insisting she'd never meant to hurt Lucy. The child advocate read each letter first, ensuring no guilt-tripping or intimidation was included, then asked Lucy if she wished to see them. Lucy typically refused. She needed time to heal. Finally, the test results came in positive. Lucy Friedman was indeed the daughter of Peter Friedman, a 42-year-old mechanic living in upstate New York. He'd only discovered Lucy existed after a distant acquaintance saw the news story. Lucy's birth mother, apparently, had passed from illness soon after Lucy's birth, leaving Lucy in Bethany's guardianship, though the details remained murky. Lucy's father, not around at the time, never signed away his rights, or so he claimed. He wanted to reclaim fatherhood, but the court needed to see if he was fit. Lucy found the entire situation mind-boggling. She was stunned that her mother might have quietly taken custody without the father's knowledge. That seemed an enormous betrayal. The day Lucy was scheduled for a phone call with Peter Friedman, her hands were clammy. She sat in the Johnsons' modest living room, the child advocate next to her for support. The phone rang, and Lucy inhaled shakily. "Hello?" A man's voice, rough and unsteady, responded. "Hi, Lucy? I'm Peter Friedman. I guess that makes me your dad." Lucy closed her eyes, tears leaking out. "I guess so." An awkward hush, then he murmured, I've wanted to find you, but I never knew you existed until recently. I'm so sorry you had to go through everything. If I'd known, I'd have come sooner." She heard the rawness in his words, a sincerity that made her chest tighten. I'm just glad you're not ignoring me." She managed. He let out a trembling laugh. "Ignore you? No way. I want you safe, Lucy. If the court decides I can meet you in person, I'd love that. I don't want to push you, though." Lucy nodded, tears dripping. "Okay, I'd like to meet you, too." She felt the child advocate's supportive hand on her shoulder. This moment was surreal. She was forging a new path away from the life of fear under Bethany. Maybe a father's presence could become the stable anchor she always craved. But a quiet voice in her head cautioned. People can disappoint you. She'd proceed carefully. In the next hearing, the judge listened to the child advocate's recommendation. Lucy would remain with the Johnsons for a transitional period, while the court assessed Peter Friedman's ability to take custody. Bethany, meanwhile, faced criminal charges for embezzlement plus child endangerment. Bethany stood there, eyes vacant, as the judge read the official updates. Lucy heard a dull roar in her ears. She remembered Bethany's mocking, controlling voice, and a complicated mixture of sorrow and relief overcame her. Then the judge turned to Lucy. "Miss Friedman," he said gently, "would you be open to a supervised meeting with Mr. Friedman in person?" Lucy swallowed. She glimpsed Peter Friedman in the seats behind the child advocate, a tall man with broad shoulders, dark hair peppered with silver, eyes red as if from tears or sleepless nights. She nodded timidly. "Yes, I think so." The judge nodded. "We'll arrange that. Miss Hammond is barred from contact except through official channels, pending resolution of the criminal case. That is all for now." As the gavel struck, Lucy stepped into the hallway. She caught a glimpse of Peter Friedman approaching shyly. The child advocate stepped in, ensuring Lucy was comfortable. Lucy peered up at the man who was allegedly her father. He looked uncertain, vulnerable. "Hi," she whispered. He pressed his lips together. "Hey, Lucy. Good to see you in person." The advocate guided them to a private room for a short, chaperoned introduction. Lucy perched on a seat, feeling equal parts anxious and hopeful. He asked about her favorite subjects at school, about her cat at the Johnsons', though Lucy admitted it was their cat, not hers. She found him patient, with a worn gentleness that spoke of regret. He described living in a small, tidy apartment, working at a local garage. Lucy's heart clenched as she realized that, in another life, she might have grown up helping him fix cars or hearing bedtime stories from him. Instead, she'd grown up in Bethany's house of fear. Still, Lucy told herself not to expect a fairy tale father figure. People are complicated. She'd learned that the hard way. But as they parted, he gave a small, hopeful smile. "I'd like to spend more time if you want," he said softly. She nodded, ignoring the lump in her throat. In the days that followed, Lucy alternated between normal 10-year-old routines, school, homework, playing with the Johnsons' cat, and extraordinary legal matters. Bethany's trial advanced. She publicly insisted on her innocence, but evidence stacked higher each day. The local papers painted her as a manipulator who possibly kidnapped or illegally adopted Lucy. Some folks pitied Bethany, calling her a misguided woman. Others demonized her. Lucy, however, was done with extremes. She just wanted truth about her birth mother, about why Bethany had taken her, about whether she had any real good memories with the woman who'd raised her. One evening, Miss Patel visited, bringing Lucy a small scrapbook. "I made this for you," Miss Patel explained, flipping through photos of Lucy's school events. "I want you to remember there were good moments. Even if your mother overshadowed you, you had friends, teachers who cared." Lucy blinked tears away, grateful. She realized not everything in her childhood was horrible. Bethany's overshadowing presence was the darkest part, but Lucy had her own small joys. That perspective comforted her. Finally, the day came for Lucy to testify again, this time in a more formal capacity for Bethany's criminal hearing. The tension was immense. Lucy dreaded seeing Bethany, but she steeled herself. She recounted how Bethany manipulated donation logs, how Lucy overheard suspicious phone calls. She also described discipline that verged on abuse. Meanwhile, Bethany's defense attorney tried to poke holes, implying Lucy was coached. Lucy clung to her calm, quietly refuting each suggestion. "I'm telling the truth," she insisted, voice trembling yet determined. Bethany on the stand cast Lucy a heartbroken glance. "I never meant to harm you, Lucy. I loved you," she said. Lucy's chest twisted. Maybe it was partly true. Maybe Bethany loved Lucy in a controlling, misguided way. But Lucy refused to waver. At the end of that trial day, Bethany was remanded for further legal processing. Lucy's father, Peter Friedman, gently patted Lucy's back outside the courtroom. "You okay, kiddo?" Lucy exhaled shakily, noticing how the word kiddo felt oddly comforting from him. "I guess so," she replied. He offered a small grin. The bravest people aren't the ones who shout loud. They're the ones who quietly do what's right. Lucy recalled Miss Patel once said something similar. She felt a wave of gratitude for these new adult figures who recognized her quiet courage. With the abuse claims upheld and Bethany's criminal case heading toward a likely guilty verdict, the path cleared for Lucy's permanent arrangement. The child advocate recommended a gradual transition to living with her father, pending additional screenings of Peter Friedman's home environment. Lucy found herself a swirl of nerves. She had spent a decade in one house, albeit a painful one. Could she adapt to a father's world in upstate New York? But on a crisp afternoon in late autumn, Lucy visited Peter Friedman's small apartment. The child advocate accompanied her. The building was modest, with scuffed floors in the hallway, a faint odor of detergent. Inside, however, Lucy spotted a cozy living room with threadbare couches, a TV in the corner, and a cluster of old family photos along a shelf. One photo snagged Lucy's attention, a young woman with curly dark hair smiling widely. She had Lucy's eyes. Lucy realized it must be her birth mother. She felt an ache, thinking of the mother she never knew. Beside her in the photo was a younger Peter Friedman, arms around her shoulders, radiating happiness. Lucy swallowed back tears. Peter Friedman led Lucy around. "It's not fancy," he admitted, "but it's home. And if you come live here, we can decorate your room however you like." Lucy nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She tested the bed in the small bedroom he'd prepared, noticing fresh sheets, a soft stuffed bunny perched on the pillow. He tried to hide his nervousness, but Lucy sensed it. "You like bunnies, right? Or maybe you prefer cats," he ventured awkwardly. Lucy let out a small laugh. "Bunnies are okay." The tension eased. Within a month, the judge gave conditional approval. Lucy could stay with Peter Friedman, if weekly check-ins confirmed everything was stable, plus therapy sessions to help Lucy recover from the trauma. Lucy prepared to move from the Johnsons' house, hugging them farewell. They'd been so kind. She was grateful. Her father arrived in a battered SUV to pick her up, the trunk ready for her modest belongings. The journey to upstate New York felt surreal. Lucy clutched her teddy, silently watching farmland pass by. She was leaving her old life behind, forging something new. She prayed quietly that she'd find peace there. Now, living with her father, Lucy discovered day by day that not all men were cold or violent like Bethany. Peter Friedman was gentle, respectful, giving Lucy space to define her routines. He introduced her to neighbors, showed her the small park down the street. Lucy still had nightmares at times about Bethany's angry voice, but each morning, her father offered a listening ear. He'd brew tea for her if she was shaky at night, and he'd say, "It's okay to cry if you need to." She marveled that no one had ever told her that before. Therapy sessions began. Lucy found them helpful but draining. She told the therapist about the guilt of betraying Bethany, the confusion about her mother's identity, the deep fear that she was unlovable. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman with warm eyes, reminded Lucy she was not to blame for Bethany's actions. "Bethany betrayed your trust, not the other way around," the therapist said. Lucy fought tears, nodding. Slowly, Lucy's nightmares receded in frequency. She began to build a sense of self-worth. Months rolled on, culminating in the final sentencing for Bethany's crimes. Lucy was not required to appear in court that day, but she followed the news. Bethany received a multi-year prison sentence for financial fraud, plus mandatory counseling for child abuse. Lucy felt a complex swirl of sadness. Bethany was paying for her misdeeds, but Lucy's heart remained bruised. She wasn't sure if she'd ever see her mother again. Possibly one day. For now, she told herself that forgiveness doesn't have to come quickly, but you can keep a corner of compassion open. That was a phrase Miss Patel had offered once, echoing a proverb. Bitterness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Lucy wanted to free herself from bitterness if she could. Her father's home gradually felt like Lucy's own. She made a few friends at her new school. She discovered she loved drawing rabbits in her notebook. She joined a junior choir, ironically discovering that, while Bethany forced her to be perfect, her father let her be messy, experiment with songs, or skip them if she was tired. The freedom was exhilarating. One crisp winter evening, Lucy found a letter in the mailbox, no return address. She recognized Bethany's handwriting. Her father asked carefully, "Do you want to read it, or should I hold on to it for you?" Lucy hesitated, then decided to read. The letter was surprisingly short, apologizing for the hurt, saying she hoped Lucy was well, proclaiming love but not demanding anything. Lucy felt her chest tighten. She wasn't ready to write back, not yet. She told her father so. He nodded, respecting her choice. She placed the letter in a small box along with a few childhood photos, telling herself that maybe one day she'd revisit it with a calmer heart. By early spring, Lucy turned 11, celebrating with a modest party. Miss Patel even came to visit, bringing a homemade cake. The Johnsons drove up, as did the child advocate, forming a small but heartfelt circle of people who cared about Lucy. She realized she'd formed a new family, out of the broken shards of her old life. The highlight was when Lucy's father gifted her a blank canvas and a set of professional pencils, encouraging her to keep drawing. "Create a new world," he said. She blinked away tears, hugging him. For the first time, she believed she could. The memory of that day lingered. Lucy had found a second chance, like the final lines of a poem she once read. "In the brokenness, I found a path to bloom." She might always carry scars from Bethany's manipulation, but Lucy Friedman was no longer living in fear. She had discovered her quiet voice, told the judge about her mother, and stunned everyone. But more importantly, she stunned herself by realizing she was braver than she'd ever dreamed. When Lucy Friedman first stepped out of her father's battered SUV and onto the creaking porch of his modest home in upstate New York, her heart fluttered in conflicting beats of anxiety and guarded hope. The sun hung low in the evening sky, washing the street in amber light. She clutched a small paper bag holding her few personal items, some clothes folded by the Johnsons, a couple of art pencils, and the plush teddy bear she'd carried all the way from her old life. Through the partially open door, she glimpsed a warm glow from a single floor lamp. As she inhaled the crisp air, Lucy found herself wondering if this moment would prove that the fresh start she so desperately needed was truly within reach, or just another fragile illusion. Peter Friedman led her inside with gentle, almost shy gestures, conscious that this was her first time truly arriving as a resident, not just a visitor. The hush of the small living room enveloped them both. She'd been here once before, during that supervised check, but that felt like a preview. Now she was truly here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. A clean, woodsy scent filled the house, her father's cologne, maybe some trace of pine from the rural surroundings. Lucy clutched the handle of her bag so tightly that her knuckles ached. Yet as she walked further in, observing the second-hand sofa with its worn cushions, the bookshelf lined with old car repair manuals, and a few scattered novels, she found a flicker of comfort in the simplicity. This was a home formed by real, everyday struggles, not a polished facade like Bethany's tidy suburban house. Nervousness crackled in the silence, pushing Lucy to speak first. "So, this is my room?" she asked softly, glancing at the door to the right that her father had pointed out. She recalled the small bed, the single desk, and that stuffed bunny he'd gifted her. It was modest but felt genuine, absent the showy perfection that had always unnerved her in Bethany's domain. Peter Friedman nodded, giving her a tentative smile. "Yes, if you want anything changed, paint color, furniture, I can try to manage. I'm not a rich man, but we'll figure it out. I want you to be comfortable here." The sincerity in his voice simultaneously soothed her and made her chest ache. She'd rarely heard an adult speak so openly about wanting her comfort. Lucy stepped into the room, flicking on the overhead lamp. A pale glow revealed dusty corners and plain beige walls. A single window faced a backyard that was mostly overgrown grass. She set her bag on the bed and glanced back at her father, who lingered in the doorway, almost as if he feared stepping inside would intimidate her. For a moment, Lucy wasn't sure what to say. She was only 11 now, having just had that quiet birthday celebration at the Johnsons', and she still couldn't quite wrap her mind around living with a father who had been absent her entire life. Yet she wanted to try. He had, after all, shown up earnestly, claimed her, proven paternity, and was taking these uncertain steps alongside her. Peter cleared his throat. "I was going to heat up some soup for dinner. Nothing fancy, but it's warm. And maybe after we can talk about school enrollment or, what activities you like. I don't want to rush you. It's been a long drive." Her stomach fluttered at the mention of school, new classmates, new teachers, but she forced a small nod. "Okay," she answered. "Soup is good." They made their way back to the living room, where the only table was a little round one near the kitchen area. Peter turned on an old radio softly, classical music with faint static, and busied himself at the stove. Lucy took a seat, staring at the slightly peeling wallpaper and the single photograph of her father with a younger woman, presumably her birth mother, that perched on a side table. The woman's face was luminous with joy, her dark curls tangled in the wind. Lucy recognized her own round cheeks in that woman's portrait. The swirl of longing and confusion in Lucy's heart felt almost too big to bear. Over dinner, the conversation came in fits and starts. Peter asked about the Johnsons, about how Lucy had found them. Lucy explained that they were a foster family, arranged by the child advocate, and how kind they'd been. She carefully skirted the emotional depths of how wonderful it felt to be protected for the first time, or how it also hammered home the realization that Bethany had never offered that safe consistency. She mentioned Miss Patel in passing, praising her teacher's role. Peter seemed relieved that Lucy had had someone who cared when he himself was absent. In the quiet moments between spoonfuls of soup, Lucy's mind drifted to all the unspoken questions. Where had her father been all these years? Why hadn't he found her sooner? She was too timid to raise these topics right away, but they pressed heavily in her chest. At the same time, she recalled a line from an old quote Miss Patel had offered: "Courage is the fear that has said its prayers." Lucy decided that maybe tomorrow or the next day, she'd gather the courage to ask the bigger questions. That night, Lucy prepared for bed, rummaging through her bag for pajamas, brushing her teeth in a bathroom that smelled faintly of shaving cream and old toothpaste. She was used to a more rigid bedtime routine under Bethany. Be in bed by 8:30 sharp, no talking, no lights. Here, Peter Friedman asked if she wanted a nightlight, and when she nodded, he rummaged through a closet until he found a small plug-in lamp shaped like a star. The gesture warmed Lucy's heart more than she cared to admit. She lay down on that stiff mattress, feeling the unfamiliar lumps of the pillow, staring at the starry glow that painted little patterns on the ceiling. She listened to the quiet hum of her father in the other room, finishing dishes. No ranting or scolding about chores undone, no tension that made her stomach tie itself in knots. The hush was restful, not ominous. She exhaled slowly, letting her mind ease. And then the therapy sessions resumed, this time with a local counselor who specialized in trauma. Lucy found it draining but also strangely empowering. She described the nightmares, the tension that still plagued her muscles when she heard a sharp noise. The counselor taught her breathing exercises, urged her to keep a small journal. She also encouraged Lucy to consider, it's valid to feel conflicting emotions toward Bethany. Love, anger, sorrow. The counselor's voice was gentle but firm. You're allowed to be upset at someone you also cared about. Lucy, for so long, had thought that hating Bethany was the only option, or else loving her blindly. Now she realized she could dwell in a nuanced middle space, letting complicated feelings exist. As the weeks turned into a couple of months, Lucy established a routine in the Friedman household. She'd wake, help with breakfast, catch the school bus at the corner. She made a friend at her new middle school, a girl named Michaela, who was quiet but friendly, offering Lucy a seat in the cafeteria. Slowly, Lucy opened up about her love for drawing animals. They bonded over short doodling sessions in Michaela's notebook. None of Michaela's questions about Lucy's past felt prying. Lucy liked that. She never once mentioned the reason she was living with her father, and Michaela never pressed. It was a small blessing. Meanwhile, Lucy's father, true to his word, tried improving his cooking. They'd share small dinners, sometimes spaghetti or grilled cheese. Each night, Lucy went to bed with no tension about whether she'd be scolded or locked in her room. That sense of calm was still foreign. On more than one occasion, tears slipped out unexpectedly, simply because she realized she wasn't living in fear. The counselor told her that was normal. Her body needed to process the relief. One chilly Saturday, Lucy gathered her courage and decided it was time to broach the subject. She found her father in the living room, flipping through channels on an old TV. She sat beside him. He glanced over, raising a brow. "What's up, Lucy?" he asked gently. She clasped her hands. Can we talk about how I ended up with Bethany?" The question hung in the air. She watched him exhale, tension creeping into his posture. She worried he might evade it, but after a moment, Peter Friedman nodded, setting the remote aside. He turned to face her fully, shoulders slumping as though bracing himself. "I guess I owe you that story," he murmured. "But fair warning, it's not pleasant." Lucy nodded, bracing herself. "I can handle it. Or at least, I want to know." Peter began, voice low, his gaze distant as if seeing the past. He dated Lucy's mother, Sharon Friedman, in his early 20s. They weren't well off. Sharon discovered she was pregnant, and both panicked and tried to scramble resources. Then Sharon grew ill. The medical bills piled up. Bethany, who was an acquaintance of Sharon's from an old church circle, offered some form of assistance, claiming to be a caretaker who had extra funds. Peter said that after Lucy was born, Sharon's health deteriorated fast. On her deathbed, Sharon supposedly signed some guardianship papers. Peter, reeling from the loss, was told by Bethany that Sharon wanted Lucy in a more stable environment. "I was a mess," Peter confessed, his eyes misty. "I had no stable job, no home. Bethany convinced me Lucy would be better off with her. She promised I could keep in touch, but then I never heard from her. She changed her number, left no trace. I was too broken, too naive to fight it." Lucy felt tears prick her eyes. "So you tried to find me?" He swallowed, nodding. "Yes, for the first couple years, I tried contacting old acquaintances from church. No one knew or admitted where Bethany had gone. I got depressed, lost direction, ended up moving states. I hated myself for giving up. Then out of nowhere, I saw a news article about a local charity scandal and recognized your photo. I realized the daughter in the story might be my Lucy. I was furious at myself for not trying harder all these years, but here we are." Lucy studied his face. She saw no deception there, only sorrow and regret. She let out a shaky breath. I was told you abandoned me, that you left Mom, but it was Bethany who took me away from you. Peter Friedman's voice cracked. I guess so. I never meant to vanish from your life, Lucy. I can't change the past, but I promise you, I want to be here now. Tears slid down her cheeks. She leaned against his arm tentatively, feeling him stiffen in surprise, then gently wrap an arm around her shoulders. The moment felt raw, an unspoken acceptance that while they'd lost years, maybe they could salvage a father-daughter bond. The quiet enveloped them like a fragile truce. Lucy let herself breathe in that acceptance, tears mingling with relief. That night, she wrote in her new journal, I finally know what happened. It still hurts, but it's better than not knowing. Dad is trying. I think that's enough for me right now. She closed the journal with a soft sigh. In the months that followed, Lucy's father officially petitioned for permanent custody. The child advocate reported Lucy's positive adjustment. The therapist noted Lucy was progressing well in dealing with her trauma. On the other side, Bethany's legal battles deepened. She was indicted on multiple felony counts of fraud and could face many years behind bars. Lucy heard the murmurs from Miss Patel about how Bethany's defense was falling apart. Lucy sometimes found herself oddly numb about it, as if her mother's fate was now a far-off shadow. She still got occasional letters from Bethany, which she mostly saved unopened, uncertain if reading them would bring closure or just more confusion. As for Lucy's day-to-day life, she had carved out new joys. She joined a small art club at school. She found she liked drawing forest animals best, foxes, deer, squirrels, even black bears in charcoal sketches. Michaela teased Lucy that she should illustrate a children's book. Lucy just laughed shyly, amazed that she had this unrestrained freedom to develop her interests without fear. She was learning that real family, real love, meant encouragement, not intimidation. The differences felt vast, yet she was still so used to glancing over her shoulder, bracing for scolding that never came. Eventually, the final hearing approached. The judge, having gathered all evidence, was set to make a conclusive custody ruling. Lucy's father prepared documentation about his stable living situation, his employment, and Lucy's counselor recommended that Lucy remain with him unless Lucy chose otherwise. On the flip side, Bethany no longer had any real claim. Her criminal convictions overshadowed her. Yet the system, by law, had to finalize the arrangement. Lucy and her father drove to the courthouse that morning under a gray sky, drizzle tapping the windshield. Lucy wore a simple navy dress, hugging her arms as they stepped out. She recalled the first time she'd been here, trembling on the witness stand, but now the sense of dread was replaced by a cautious optimism. She might walk out with a final sense of belonging. In the hallway, Lucy spotted Miss Patel waiting. They exchanged a quick hug. The child advocate arrived, giving Lucy a wink of encouragement. "You've come so far," she whispered. Lucy smiled, shoulders relaxing. She caught sight of her father giving a small wave from across the corridor where the bailiff was calling them in. Lucy inhaled, steadying herself, then followed them into the same wood-paneled chamber that once felt so intimidating. The hearing was brief. The judge stated that, given Miss Hammond's criminal convictions, the court saw no safe environment for Lucy in that direction. He recognized Mr. Friedman's paternal rights and Lucy Friedman's clear progress under her father's care. With a short flourish of official phrases, the judge pronounced that Lucy Friedman was to remain under her father's custody, with full paternal rights recognized and no further oversight needed except recommended therapy follow-ups. Lucy felt a surge of emotion. This was it, the official stamp. She was Lucy Friedman, daughter of Peter Friedman, free from Bethany's control at last. A hush fell as the judge banged the gavel. Miss Patel quietly cheered, the child advocate beamed, and Lucy turned to her father, who knelt down, opening his arms if she wanted a hug. This time, Lucy didn't hesitate. She stepped into that hug, tears welling in her eyes. She felt the firm kindness of his embrace, so different from anything she'd known. Miss Patel dabbed at her eyes in the background, and Lucy heard the child advocate murmur, "She deserves this moment." Lucy sniffled, a watery smile on her lips, thinking of the lines Miss Patel had once read to her. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul. Indeed, hope was perched in Lucy's soul now, softly beating its wings. Outside, The drizzle had lightened to a gentle mist. Lucy, her father, Miss Patel, and the child advocate clustered near the courthouse steps, ignoring the few reporters who snapped pictures from a distance. Lucy tried not to cringe at the memory of how those cameras once haunted her. Miss Patel offered Lucy a small gift bag. Inside was a new set of colored pencils, the high-quality kind Lucy had long admired in art shops. Lucy's father smiled. "Looks like you have all you need to keep creating," he said. Lucy's grin widened, and for a fleeting moment, everything felt right. They parted ways with Miss Patel and the child advocate, stepping into the father's SUV. Lucy gazed out at the passing shops, the gray clouds drifting. She felt the gentle hum of the engine under her feet. Her father asked if she wanted ice cream. She found herself nodding eagerly. It was so normal, so delightfully everyday. They ended up at a quaint ice cream parlor, the windows fogged with warm air inside. Lucy chose chocolate mint. Her father got coffee flavor. They sat in a corner booth, occasionally exchanging small talk about how Lucy might want to join an art summer camp or volunteer at an animal shelter. The future spread out before her, a blank page waiting for sketches and color. That night, after Lucy had changed into pajamas, she found herself flipping through her brand new set of colored pencils. The box boasted a rainbow of possibilities. Impulsively, she took out a piece of sketch paper. She drew something that had lingered in her mind for months. A small bird perched on a windowsill, wings half lifted, as if about to take flight, but not quite certain. She used soft browns and grays for the bird, adding a few touches of bright turquoise to its wing edges, an imaginative flourish. The window behind it was tinted with pale sunlight. She didn't outline any bars or locks, just open sky beyond. The quiet significance of that sky made her chest ache with something akin to joy. When she finished, she labeled it possibility. She stared at that single word. She realized that was exactly how she felt, uncertain but free to explore, to exist without tyranny. She recalled the final words Bethany had spoken at the sentencing, as reported by Miss Patel. An apology, a tearful recognition that she had been in the wrong. Lucy tried to let that sink in, acknowledging she might never fully reconcile with Bethany. But perhaps that faint thread of remorse was a step. The counselor said, "Forgiveness is a process. You do it at your pace." Lucy repeated that to herself. The future was hers, and she had no obligation to rush. Over the following weeks, Lucy's father quietly built their new routine. They'd grocery shop together, Lucy selecting cereals or fresh fruit. He taught her how to check oil in a car engine, showing her a real father-daughter moment that warmed her heart. Sometimes they'd walk in the nearby woods. Lucy discovered a knack for collecting pine cones, pressing them into a journal to create whimsical patterns. She found she no longer dreaded footsteps approaching her door. She no longer braced for an explosion if she spilled a drink. This sense of daily normalcy was the biggest gift of all. Lucy still had occasional nightmares, especially as if something triggered memories of Bethany's harsh punishments. Once, when her father clapped his hands loudly to call her from outside, she startled so violently that she nearly burst into tears. She apologized, feeling silly. He, stricken with concern, told her, "You have nothing to be sorry about, Lucy. I promise." Those gentle words helped her see that healing would be a bumpy path, but not one she had to walk alone. She saw her therapist regularly, learning coping strategies, like writing in her journal whenever dark thoughts flared, or speaking out loud the phrase, "I am safe, I am loved," until her heart rate calmed. At school, Lucy grew closer to Michaela and a couple of other friends. She joined the after-school art club, painting a mural in the hallway. She even discovered a timid interest in singing, though quietly, under her breath, and Miss Bechtel, the counselor, suggested she try the junior choir if she felt comfortable. Lucy hesitated, still recalling how Bethany used to force her to do everything perfectly, punishing even minor mistakes. But with Miss Bechtel's encouragement, Lucy decided to audition. She sang softly, heart-pounding, yet the choir teacher said she had a gentle, melodic tone. She was welcomed into the group. That acceptance made Lucy's eyes glisten with tears of unexpected happiness. She told her father that night, and he gave her a proud smile, ruffling her hair. "You're braver than you know," he said, repeating a phrase that had come up more and more in their home. One Saturday, Miss Patel surprised Lucy with a short visit. She brought news that Bethany had formally pleaded guilty to certain fraud counts, reducing her trial time. Lucy listened, a knot forming in her stomach. Miss Patel added that Bethany might be seeking therapy in prison, might be released after a few years if she showed good behavior. The possibility of Bethany reemerging into Lucy's life felt distant but not impossible. Lucy's father watched Lucy's reaction carefully, offering to speak privately if she wanted. Lucy said yes. Miss Patel excused herself, giving them space in the living room. Lucy sank onto the couch, staring at the floor. Her father sat across from her. "You okay, Lucy? If Bethany eventually gets out, we might have to decide how to handle contact. We can cross that bridge when we get to it. But how do you feel?" Lucy fiddled with her fingers. "A part of me never wants to see her again," she admitted, voice trembling. "Another part, I don't know. It's like I spent my whole life with her, believing she was my mother. Even with the bad stuff, that was my world." She paused, tears brimming. "I guess I'm scared. Scared that she'll want me back and do more harm, or that I'll feel guilty for letting her suffer alone." Her father's eyes filled with compassion. He scooted closer, taking her hands in his calloused palms. "You have no obligation to her that includes being her punching bag or scapegoat," he said gently. "If you want to keep your distance, that's valid. If someday you decide to see her in a safe environment, that's your choice too. I won't let her hurt you again." Lucy let out a shuddering breath. She'd rarely seen a grown-up so protective of her feelings. She realized this was how fatherhood could be. A shield, not a whip. She nodded, relieved. "Thank you," she whispered. The conversation ended with no definitive plan, but Lucy felt a slight easing of dread. She understood she wasn't alone in this anymore. If Bethany reappeared, Lucy would have an ally. She wasn't that frightened, isolated 10-year-old forced to cover bruises. She was Lucy Friedman, forging her own path. Summer approached, and Lucy's father arranged for her to attend a local art day camp at the community center. Lucy, shy at first, discovered she loved working with watercolors in a group setting. She painted swirling galaxies with bright pink nebula, or whimsical woodland creatures. Her teachers praised her creativity. She made a few camp friends who teased her about her quiet nature, but recognized her sense of humor once she warmed up. That sense of normal teenage life, unburdened by shadows, was thrilling. Lucy sometimes felt waves of guilt. Should I feel this happy after all that's happened? But the therapy sessions reminded her that yes, she deserved joy, that healing and happiness were not betrayals of her past. During one of the camp's exhibitions, Lucy's father visited and admired her paintings with obvious pride. She found herself smiling so broadly it hurt her cheeks. Miss Patel also attended as a surprise, giving Lucy a small bouquet of daisies. Lucy had never felt so validated. That night, she stuck the daisies in a jar on her windowsill, letting them bathe in the moonlight, a silent testament to how far she'd come. But not every day was bright. Lucy encountered triggers that brought back the old anxiety. A classmate slammed a desk in frustration, and Lucy flinched, heart pounding. She had to step out to breathe. Another time, she overheard a father scolding his child harshly at the grocery store, and it almost sent Lucy into a spiral of old memories. She used the coping strategies from therapy, breathing in for 4 counts, out for 6, telling herself, "I'm safe. That's not my life anymore." In quiet moments, she sometimes cried, mourning the mother she'd once believed in, but she no longer sank into hopelessness. She had the anchor of a loving father, supportive community, and her own blossoming resilience. That autumn, Lucy turned 12 with a small party. Miss Patel came, along with Michaela and a few other friends. They baked a homemade cake. Lucy's father set up a mild scavenger hunt in the backyard. She laughed freely, unself-conscious. After the guests left, Lucy sat in her room, unwrapping a present from her father, a sleek new sketch pad with heavier paper for more advanced artwork. She thanked him with shining eyes. He nodded, voice slightly choked. "I'm proud of you, Lucy," he said. "Proud of how strong you've been, and how kind." She felt tears threaten again, but they were tears of gratitude. She realized that if she'd never told the judge the truth about Bethany, if she'd never broken that silence, she might still be imprisoned in fear. The thought chilled her, but also made her silently vow never to hide from truth again. At the local middle school, Lucy's grades flourished. Freed from Bethany's oppressive demands, she found studying less stressful. She discovered that she liked math challenges. The teacher praised her for quick reasoning. Maybe it was a side effect of the cunning survival skills she developed. Regardless, Lucy was delighted to excel academically without fear of punishment if she slipped. She was allowed to be human, to celebrate achievements or accept small mistakes. That freedom filled her with renewed confidence. In the final months of the year, Lucy's father introduced her to extended relatives on his side, a couple of cousins who lived in a neighboring town. She was shy at first, but they welcomed her warmly. They showed Lucy old family photos, pointing out resemblances to her father's mother who had passed. Lucy felt an odd but comforting sense of belonging, piecing together her paternal heritage. She took mental snapshots of these gatherings, storing them as the family memories she'd never had growing up. One windy December day, Miss Patel and the child advocate arrived with big smiles, bringing Lucy official paperwork. The judge had at last closed all oversight, finalizing Lucy Friedman as fully recognized under her father's guardianship. "No more check-ins needed unless you request them," the child advocate said, hugging Lucy. "You're free to be a normal kid now." The word normal might have sounded mundane to some, but Lucy found it thrilling. Her father took them out for pizza that night in celebration, joking that now the state can't scold me for letting you eat pepperoni, right? Lucy laughed, feeling a sense of final release. On the drive home, Lucy stared out the window at the swirling snow, reflecting on the entire journey. She recalled standing in that hushed courtroom, voice trembling, telling the judge about her mother's hidden cruelty and the shocking fact that she wasn't even Lucy's birth mother. Lucy remembered the shock on people's faces. Everyone was stunned. Yes, but Lucy too had stunned herself by how she mustered that courage. If she could speak that day, she could face other obstacles in life. She was braver than she'd ever realized. Sometimes, Lucy still missed the mother she thought she had, the version of Bethany who in Lucy's early childhood read bedtime stories and baked cookies. But illusions can break painfully. Lucy was learning to accept that the real Bethany was deeply flawed, manipulative, and perhaps worthy of pity, but not trust. That acceptance didn't banish the longing entirely, yet Lucy felt sure that forging new, healthy relationships was the path forward. She carried a quiet hope that maybe one day, Bethany would truly transform in prison. Maybe they'd speak again under safe conditions. If that day came, Lucy would approach it with eyes wide open, protected by her father and by her own self-respect. On Christmas morning, Lucy woke to the delicious smell of cinnamon rolls. She padded into the living room to find her father wearing a silly Santa hat, presenting a plate of fresh pastries. The small artificial tree in the corner was decorated with mismatched ornaments, some from the local thrift store, others Lucy had made in art club. She found a single small box wrapped under that tree with her name on it. Opening it, she discovered a new paint set, complete with little tubes of acrylic colors, bright and cheerful. She blinked back tears, hugging her father. "Thank you," she whispered. "This is perfect." He patted her back, grinning. "I figured you might like more mediums to explore. You're turning into quite the artist. I can't wait to see what you paint next." Lucy felt a glowing warmth fill her chest. They spent the morning munching cinnamon rolls, listening to holiday music on an old radio, unwrapping a few more modest gifts. The day was simple, heartwarming in a way Lucy had rarely experienced. She wrote in her journal that night, "This is what a family morning can feel like. Calm, happy, no tension. I never knew it could be so normal." That winter, Lucy also continued therapy, especially addressing her nightmares. Gradually, she found she was sleeping better. The sessions shifted from traumatic recollection to future-oriented goals. The counselor asked Lucy about her dreams for the next year. Lucy said she wanted to join an official art competition or volunteer with animals. The counselor beamed, telling Lucy she had the power now to shape her own story. Lucy found that thrilling. Freed from the shackles of fear, she discovered her imagination soared. She even sketched a short comic about a small bird who escaped a golden cage, learning to fly in a wide sky. Miss Patel loved it when Lucy showed it to her, calling it a beautiful metaphor. Lucy had to agree. Meanwhile, Lucy's father quietly navigated the routine of single parenthood. He sometimes worked longer hours at the mechanic shop, but always made sure Lucy had a safe ride home from school or after-school activities. She saw how he was adjusting to, forging a fatherly role he'd never practiced before. He might not be perfect. Some dinners were still burnt, some weekends he forgot laundry, but Lucy appreciated the genuine care behind his mistakes. They laughed about such mishaps instead of cowering, a testament to how drastically her life had changed. In early spring, Lucy participated in an art show organized by her middle school. She entered a piece that featured two distinct silhouettes, a shadowy figure behind bars and a child stepping beyond them into the light. The symbolism was direct, but Lucy no longer felt shy about telling her truth through art. The piece won a small award for emotional impact. Lucy's father attended the ceremony, clapping proudly as Lucy accepted her certificate. She caught his tearful gaze, and her heart brimmed with gratitude. She recalled a line Miss Patel had once recited from an old poet, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls." Lucy wasn't sure if she was the strongest soul, but she definitely felt stronger than she used to. That summer, Lucy turned 13, stepping into official teenager territory. Michaela teased her, "Now you can't claim to be a little kid." Lucy teased back that she felt about 100 years older than she was, given all she'd faced. They decided to have a small party at Lucy's house, and her father gamely bought snacks, let them watch a silly movie, and tried to stay out of the girls' hair. The event was a success, with giggles filling the living room instead of anxious hushes. Lucy found the normalcy refreshing. She paused mid-laughter, remembering how silent her old home used to be, the tension that stifled any real fun. Now laughter was free, unafraid. That realization made Lucy beam even more. Late that night, after Michaela left, Lucy rummaged through the closet for some fresh sheets, stumbling upon the battered trunk her father had apparently stored away. She recognized it as the one that held some of her mother's old documents. She paused, heart pounding. Should she open it or let it be? She considered the caution from therapy, only open emotional wounds if you feel ready. She realized she didn't want to dwell on Bethany's secrets tonight. She was building a new life. So she closed the trunk, deciding she might revisit it down the road. Right now she had a father, a stable life, a budding love of art, and that was enough. The next few months passed in a gentle blur. Lucy's father introduced her to a local volunteer program at an animal shelter, and she spent some weekends helping feed kittens or walk dogs. The joy of nurturing small creatures, seeing them respond with trust, warmed Lucy's soul. She recognized a parallel in her own story. Like these rescued animals, she had found a second chance. She took to naming them with silly, affectionate names. The shelter staff teased Lucy that she had a special knack for calming the frightened animals. Lucy would just smile, remembering how Miss Patel once said empathy grows from understanding pain. One crisp autumn day, Miss Patel visited again, bringing news that Bethany might be up for a parole hearing eventually. Lucy felt her stomach twist, but Miss Patel gently reminded Lucy that it was far from guaranteed. Lucy nodded. She found herself calmer about the concept. She'd come so far. If Bethany surfaced, Lucy would handle it with a support system around her. She no longer faced it alone. That evening, Lucy told her father about Miss Patel's update. He set down his mug of tea, resting a hand on Lucy's shoulder. "I'm here, Lucy. If she's paroled or wants to contact you, you get to decide. We can talk about it. We can set boundaries. You're not that powerless child anymore." Lucy felt tears threaten, but she only nodded, letting out a shaky exhale. "Thank you," she whispered. She realized she believed him wholeheartedly. It was a testament to how trust can bloom after trauma, given patience and honesty. As Lucy's teenage years progressed, she began to see that the day she told the judge the truth about her mother, when she was just 10, was the pivot that flipped her world. She'd been terrified then, but that single courageous act had set so many changes in motion. Freed from the secrecy, Lucy discovered that being honest about pain can lead to unexpected rescue. She thought of a line from a quote Miss Patel penned in her office. "In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer." Lucy cherished that phrase, feeling the truth of it in her bones. Gradually, Lucy expanded her horizon. She joined a youth choir at a nearby church, not the one Bethany used to attend, but a smaller, more welcoming congregation. She participated in an art fundraiser for children's charities. She found herself forging friendships that were built on laughter and mutual encouragement, not dread or forced compliance. She recognized she was living a life far richer than the facade Bethany had forced upon her. By the time Lucy neared 14, she decided to open the trunk in the closet, just to see if there was anything else about her birth mother. With her father's permission, Lucy rummaged inside. She found old letters from Sharon Friedman to a sister in another state, references to Lucy's birth, notes about hospital visits. Some lumps formed in Lucy's throat reading the love and worry Sharon expressed. Also, Lucy discovered an old photograph. Sharon, pregnant, leaning on Bethany for support. Bethany's face was unreadable. That image confirmed they had indeed known each other, but Lucy could sense something off in Bethany's stiff posture. Lucy set it aside carefully, heart swirling with complicated feelings. She might never fully unravel Bethany's motivations, why she ended up forging that parental role so obsessively, or how she justified the abuse. But Lucy no longer needed those answers to validate her own worth. As Lucy progressed into high school, her father ensured she continued therapy as needed, though by then, Lucy's trauma was less acute. She thrived academically, found she liked biology and math. She still painted in her free time, sometimes creating large canvases of swirling nature scenes. She never forgot the fragile bird sketch that symbolized her first real taste of freedom. She sometimes hung it in her bedroom as a reminder that hope gave her wings. Now Lucy was 15, a sophomore in high school, standing in an art exhibit featuring some of her pieces. She wore a simple sundress, her hair in a casual ponytail. The gallery's gentle lighting made the colors of her forest paintings pop. People milled about, complimenting the young artist's work. Lucy's father hovered, beaming with pride. Miss Patel had driven in from out of town, as had a couple of the Johnsons. Lucy overheard them praising how far she'd come. The hush of admiration settled around Lucy, and she felt a pang of humility. She wasn't used to so much positive attention, but it warmed her. She recognized in that moment that the quiet bravery she'd shown in the courtroom years ago was what started this entire transformation. The next day, Lucy found a moment to reflect. She curled up on the living room couch with her old pink backpack, which she'd kept all these years, rummaging for the journal she began during therapy. Inside, she read scattered lines from age 10 to 15. She saw how her writing style changed, how her fear turned into guarded hope, then blossomed into calm acceptance. She smiled tearfully at her younger self's trembling declarations. "I'm safe now. I'll keep being brave. I am Lucy Friedman." Those words were the foundation. At dinner that night, Lucy gently asked her father if he'd heard anything about Bethany's parole. He shook his head, expression neutral. "Not recently, kiddo. I can ask the child advocate if you want." Lucy shrugged, thinking, "I guess I'd like to know if she's still in prison or if she's out, just to be sure." He nodded. "We'll look into it, whatever you need." The casual support in his voice reaffirmed Lucy's trust that she was free to approach the past on her own terms. That weekend, they discovered Bethany's parole had been denied. She remained incarcerated, with a possible review in a couple more years. Lucy felt an odd pang, relief, pity, sadness, all swirled together. She told her father that maybe she'd write Bethany a letter eventually, not out of duty, but perhaps to find closure. "Only if you're ready," he said. Lucy appreciated the understanding. One day, Lucy might indeed pen that letter, telling Bethany that she forgave her in some measure, but could never return to the old dynamic. Perhaps she'd mention how her life had blossomed once she told the truth in that courtroom. She might even express a wish that Bethany find healing in her own time. But Lucy wasn't there yet, and that was okay. She recognized a certain calm in allowing time to do its work, not forcing quick resolutions. In the final months of Lucy's high school sophomore year, she tackled bigger art projects, joined a small volunteer group that visited a local pediatric ward to do crafts with young patients. Holding a paintbrush in one hand, showing a 6-year-old how to swirl bright pink paint for a flower, Lucy felt more confident than she'd ever imagined. This was the Lucy Friedman, who had blossomed after shattering the illusions of her old life. She thought again of the quote Miss Patel often repeated, "Our scars are part of our story, but not the end of it." Lucy embraced that wholeheartedly. Now, as she approached her 16th birthday, Lucy spent a quiet Sunday in her bedroom, painting a new canvas. The subject? A mother bird feeding a baby bird perched on a branch. The scene was tender, a display of unconditional care, the sort Lucy hadn't truly known from Bethany. But Lucy felt no bitterness painting it, only a sense of acceptance that this loving image was something she could create, even if it wasn't fully her own childhood. She had found love in other places, her father, Miss Patel, the Johnsons, her friends, her own resilience. She realized that love can come from many sources, not necessarily from the person who's supposed to give it. Finishing the final brushstrokes, Lucy stepped back, smiling softly at how the painting glowed with pastel colors. She'd come so far from that frightened girl who once dreaded every day. She placed the canvas aside to dry, contemplating how telling the judge the truth about her mother had upended everything. Yet in the end, it guided her to a safer, more genuine life, reconnected her with her birth father, and allowed her to discover her own strengths. She thought, ironically, that if she had stayed silent, no one would have known the extent of Bethany's cruelty or the theft from the shelter. Lucy Friedman's honesty, small though her voice might have been, had toppled a carefully curated empire of lies. Everyone who had once revered Bethany had been shocked to learn the truth, but that shock, Lucy realized, was the necessary impetus for real change. Standing there in her bedroom, Lucy set her paintbrush aside, gazing out the window at the late afternoon sun. She felt the quiet hush of contentment. She remembered a final line from Miss Patel's journaling advice. One day you'll realize how powerful your voice is, and you'll never let it be silenced again. Lucy Friedman knew that day had come. She whispered a gentle phrase to herself, a promise echoing in her heart. I have the right to live free from fear. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but it was a tear of resolve, not sorrow. She might never be able to fully rewrite the earliest chapters of her life, nor erase the pain inflicted by the woman she called mother for 10 years. But Lucy embraced the rest of her story, the unwritten pages that lay ahead, with quiet determination. She'd fill them with color, laughter, compassion, and the unwavering knowledge that truth, even if it stuns the world, has the power to set her free. And that, in the end, was what Lucy Friedman had gained most of all: the freedom to be herself, to breathe without fear, and to let her gentle, courageous spirit guide her into a future marked by hope.